everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Green Genes. I am your one co-host, Anneke van Rossum, joined by my other co-host,
Maya van Rossum.
And if you couldn't tell by our names, we are related. We are a mother-daughter duo who on this podcast, we talk about important environmental and social justice issues through a generational lens, just talking about how a lot of the same issues my mom was fighting, I'm fighting. And one of those issues, before we get into our topic today, which will be a little bit lighthearted, a little bit nice, we do want to bring up probably an issue that I'm sure was going on in your generation, mom. And now somehow maybe we're back in the 1915s because Samuel Alito, you jackwagon, are trying to take away women's rights with the probable reversal of Roe v. Wade, which is definitely going to happen with that leaked opinion. So Mom, I want to know your thoughts because I feel like you and I are on the same page about every woman should have a right to healthcare and protect their bodies. But like, I don't really know just like what was the conversation around abortion like for you, like in your day and age.
So first and foremost, I want to acknowledge that you and I both go by she, her pronouns. And in this particular conversation,
yes,
that is particularly important and relevant. It's important and relevant writ large, right? Because we really want everybody, we really feel it's really important to honor everybody and their sense of self and the pronouns that they use. But when it comes to abortion rights, which are rights and have been for many decades now, if you go by she, her pronoun, your opinion matters more. And
also in that note, this is like, I didn't like, again, we're on the show and we do a lot of stuff about like, it is always important to be educated. And I have not realized, and I have been realizing more in this week too, that it also can include transgender individuals who still have their uteruses, or people who are identifying as male but have decided like maybe they do want the ability to get pregnant. So also, if you have the ability to get pregnant, I guess as well, or the risk of getting pregnant, however you want to frame it, there's all these people in this decision. Basically, if you're a white man with a penis, you don't get included in this.
So that's really good, Anneke. That's a really good observation. And thank you for raising that, because I think it's so important, because often these kinds of issues get overlooked. And you're right. If you have a uterus, you may choose to use it. You may not want to use it. Regardless, you should have the ultimate first and last say about whether or not that uterus gets used. Unless, of course, nature decides for you. And like in the case of me, well, I guess it was my decision. There was a decision to remove my uterus because it was a cancer risk to me. Would I now somehow be in trouble? I mean, who knows with the way things are going? But you ask an interesting question, because I've been thinking about this. And actually, the right to an abortion was recognized, and I don't even want to say given, right? This is a right that should have legally belonged to all people with a uterus. We will now frame it that way. But it wasn't recognized constitutionally until I was a young girl. And I actually don't remember this right not existing. I don't remember when it was given, right? Like it wasn't part of my worldview. I grew up understanding that this was a choice that belonged to the person in whose body, right?
Yeah.
This scenario was going to play out one way or another. And, you know, I have a number of people in my life who have needed or chosen to have an abortion for a wide array of reasons. And in every situation, it was a really difficult decision, but it was a decision made with care and love. And I was honored to be able to be there to provide support and help in whatever ways were needed. And seeing the struggle and the difficulty of the decision, I can't imagine somebody having to go through that and now suddenly being faced with with a legal challenge, right? That you can't actually get it, or you can't get it unless you drive for hours or days, that it's just something that's not accessible to you, or that if you are pregnant and you happen to be in a state and something happens and you lose your pregnancy terminates by virtue of your body, that somehow you now have to be frightened that you're going to be accused by some wackadoodle out there in the world that suddenly says that you had an illegal abortion. I mean, there are so many issues that come into play here. But as I grew up, people were able to make that choice for themselves. And I don't remember a time when they couldn't. And it is so mind bending to think that people are going to have to face this struggle, that women or people with a uterus are going to have to face this struggle. And that now they're also talking about, right, birth control and the fact that these other rights very literally are hanging in the balance after this opinion.
It was pretty, actually not funny enough. Interestingly enough, earlier this week, so I am, on a personal note for people, I am on birth control. I have an IUD, which is, for, if you don't know what that is, it's like transplanted in your body. And I actually got it back in 2018 when Trump was in power, and there was a lot of the Planned Parenthood discussion, because legitimately I was like, I am afraid that my reproductive freedoms are going to be limited, and I don't want something god awful in the worst of ways to happen to me and have to be forced with this. So I'm going to put this thing in my body, and then if the government wants to try and take it out, they're going to have to come get me and hold it down and rip it out of my body. And that's going to be a hell of a lot harder than cutting off my prescription. And interestingly enough, at the beginning of this week, I actually thought, maybe I don't want to be on it anymore. Maybe I kind of just want my body in like a natural state. And I don't have a hormonal IUD, but I was just thinking about it. And then talking with my friends and similar things. And we're like, well, guess we're not going to now, because like, who knows what's going to happen? Who's know where it's going to go? And of course, and like, we unfortunately all didn't even have our brains go to the place of, you know, God forbid I have a medical issue, or I'm with a partner and I just didn't want to have their child. Like, we all went to like the worst possible place of like no consent. And people also, I think, don't realize too, like, abortions are very medical too, in the sense of, it's not just like, I don't want to carry this child. It's like, if your child dies inside you, even if you want to carry it, and then you go into sepsis, that's an abortion to remove that child, or that fetus, I should actually say. An ectopic pregnancy that you will likely die from requires an abortion. Like, it's so much more. And I know I said at the beginning of this, like, if you're a white man with a penis, like, shut up. And I do mean that in the sense of like, don't tell me what to do with my body. But obviously, like, there is a place and a space, and we need men too, or whatever you identify as, to stand with people. And like, everybody has a place in this fight. And I feel very fortunate that I do have male friends who have contacted me this week to just be like, are you okay? Like, how's it going? But yeah, I mean, I feel like I never thought that we would go back to this place, but
it really is a reversal. It's a transgression back. It is a taking away of rights. Again, you know, there are inalienable human rights that belong to people by virtue of the fact that they are here on this earth, and they should be in control of their own bodies and their own destinies. But unless, as we talk about in the Green Amendment movement, Anneke, unless those rights are constitutionally recognized and protected, they may be rights in name only. All those years ago, the rights for people to have control over their own bodies if they have a uterus, I keep wanting to say women, it is women, but as you said, it may also be others who don't self-identify as she, her at this point, that it finally got recognized in the Constitution. And so therefore it was enforceable. I may have lost my train of thought there, but people get where I'm going. And now to have that recognition of rights literally ripped away because some old white guy sitting in Washington, D.C. decides that he should have supreme power over your body, my body, the body of you know, more than half the people across our nation, is the height of hubris and inappropriateness. And I don't even know what the word is.
I mean, I think my friends and I too were talking about this week. Also, funny enough, people who don't know, I just finished an estates exam, which estates is the law of wills. And you know what? Dead people have a hell of a lot more rights to their stuff than I do with my own body after taking that exam. Let me tell you that, number one. But we are all talking about how, like, number one, every single one of those Supreme Court justices that is going to be quoted in that opinion are all on video at their Senate confirmation hearing saying, I'm not going to touch Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade has been in the law for 50 years, 40, wherever they were at that point. Like, I'm not going to touch it. Yeah, a bunch of them. Gorsuch, Alito. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett's, I didn't think I felt hers was pretty like, oh, she's going to fuck with it. Even Kavanaugh was like, no, that's precedent, all that stuff. So all liars. I think they should all be thrown out, number one. And also, there's like this whole, like, there's this thing called SCOTUS blog, and where they write all the Supreme Court stuff. And they did this whole thing like, this is such an egregious invasion of the trust between the staff and the justices. And like, because this is, for people who don't know, this is a leaked opinion. Like, this is not official. So Roe v. Wade is not repealed right now. It's just an indication that it will happen when they release the opinion. So this was like not supposed to be out in public. But thank God for whoever did that. Like, you are an amazing person for putting us all on alert to get ready. But they're like, this is such an invasion of trust. And like, fuck you. I'm sorry, you are deciding for, like, yeah, like you just said, over half the country that we don't get to decide what to do with our freaking bodies. And you like don't care what happens to us. I don't give a fuck about your trust. You are supposed to be deciding and interpreting the Constitution as people in the United States today want it to. And just because you want to live in 1915 doesn't mean the rest of us do. I like that floored
Well, that's
me.
the thing is, I mean, they're talking about an invasion of their trust. We're talking about an invasion of our bodies.
Yeah.
Literally being able to reach into our bodies and decide what can and cannot happen, should or should not happen, is or is not right, is or is not appropriate. I mean, that is a true invasion. And it really is a mischaracterization of the Constitution. Again, as we talk about in the Green Amendment movement all the time, constitutions are written with broad language, especially the Bill of Rights or the rights section of the Constitution are written with broad language so that they can cover the whole universe of concepts that need to be covered in the environment. In a Green Amendment field, we're talking about all the environmental rights and things that we know of now, but things that we can't anticipate that will come in the future, like, you know, decades ago, not having an awareness of the climate crisis. Today we do. Green Amendment language, properly written, should have allowed for that evolution to come into play, and in fact does. In these personal rights, in the personal rights frame, the Constitution, yes, was written broadly so that it can cover the universe of rights that need to be recognized, that need to evolve, that need to be understood over time. And there is an evolution. It does not have to be specifically mentioned in order to have constitutional fundamental rights recognition and protection. So he is just Alito by saying that if it's not specifically mentioned, it is not a constitutional right. He is misappropriating, misrepresenting, misusing the tools of constitutional interpretation that he should be utilizing as a Supreme Court justice. And if he doesn't know how to properly interpret a constitution as a living document, he needs to get thrown out of office. I'm with you there. Like, stupid man, stupid man. Sorry, but that's
Not
just
sorry.
like a basic
Not sorry.
And I have to say, you know, and I have been thinking, you know, about this in so many ways, but it is really one of the reasons why I feel it is so important to be advancing the Green Amendment movement, because there is not, except in a very out of the box way, there isn't a recognition of environmental rights. People are trying to get it interpreted into the Constitution through property rights. And at the state level, there is language that's not a fundamental in the Fundamental Bill of Rights section of state constitutions that talk about environmental rights, but they don't talk about it as a right. They talk about it as something to be protected by the state legislature, for example. And so one of the reasons, one of the impetuses I have had for advancing the Green Amendment movement is to remedy that oversight of history, to make sure that environmental rights are recognized and protected as fundamental rights in the Constitution, and to say so clearly and directly. So you cannot have a misuse of the law by a justice like Alito trying to make this misrepresentation, this mischaracterization. Well, if it's explicitly not said, it's not protected, right? By having a Green Amendment in the environmental context, we prevent that. You shouldn't have to have that. But I'm just saying he, in this very scary, creepy, inappropriate way, brought clarity to me, additional clarity to the importance of the Green Amendment movement, where we have not had environmental rights recognized as fundamental rights ever. But this is a rolling back in time of our society, taking us back. And we're being taken backwards in so many ways. Voting right. I mean, so many ways. It's just distressing.
Yeah, we could talk about it for hours, guys, but we will. I agree, and I think your Green Amendment point is very accurate. And I think too, it's one of those, like, I also kind of view like the right to the environment as also like a right to your body. Like, should I not be able to put things into my body, like water that I need to survive, that are not polluted? Should I not be able to breathe the air in my own town where I can live that's not giving me cancer and like all these things? So, I mean, I think it's on the same thing. Yeah.
It is.
But that was our anger rant. Hope you enjoyed it. Go tell Alito to fuck off. Also, on a note of if anybody you don't know how to support, you can support Planned Parenthood, but it's better to donate to your local abortion providers, because they actually tend to be the ones that give abortions, and Planned Parenthood like usually contracts out to them. So I would just go look at that, peoples. But we're gonna get into a nice fun topic as the weather gets warmer and you're going outside and enjoying some sunshine. So Mom, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah. So over, many shows, we have talked about, my personal animosity towards grass and lawns. But that's not just like a personal animosity against grass and lawns, but it is grounded in the fact that turf grass and lawns is really harmful to the environment. It causes pollution and flooding and flood damages, and it robs our natural community of critical habitats and food for a variety of species. So we've talked about that. We've talked about the importance and values of pollinators, right? And the birds and the bees and the butterflies, and how they need native habitats and native plants to live and survive and thrive. And we've talked about the many benefits that pollinators bring to our lives, not just the quality of our lives and beauty, but how we need them to create food, right? And for economic support. And so one of the questions that often comes up is, well, gosh, you're saying, Anneke and Maya, I should get rid of my lawn, I should create native habitats, or if I don't have a lawn myself, I should encourage it in my community, on municipal property, or along roads or schools. So, but like, okay, how do I make that happen? So we're going to talk today, Anneke, about some ways to start to make that happen.
I'm excited. I am. So for everyone who, on a personal note too, I don't think the green thumb was passed down to me. I feel like I kill every plant that's not a succulent. So I am interested to hear your tips. I guess like a good first question is, if people are like, I have this big lawn or maybe a small lawn, how should they start? Should they just do like a little patch? Should they like go for it all? Like, how did you start?
Well, I think the first thing to do is think about how you use your lawn and how much you want to, or in order to support your lifestyle, how much you need to maintain. right? So there are some people who have kids, right? And they go out and they kick a ball around. And so they need that lawn space to support that part of life. There are some people who just like to go out and sunbathe. So they just need a little patch of lawn, but they need to make sure that they have sunlight, right? So some of it is thinking about, there are some people that use their front yards for different activities, and there are some people that don't do anything in their front yards except mow it or have it mowed, right? So I think the first thing is to think about how you use your lawn or your lawnscape and how much you would like to preserve as lawn in order to support those uses. And likewise, if you're talking about municipal property or school property, which portions of the municipal landscape or the school landscape is used for an activity where lawn is helpful, and which portions are used just for fossil fuel mowing. And that's the place to start. Once you have that sort of grand vision, as you said, Anneke, some people are going to go big and say, you know what, man, I just want to take out all that lawn I've decided I don't want or need. And some people are going to say, a little scary. I need to start with a little patch or little patches. So I think part of it depends on your own personality, Anneke, but that's a great starting question.
And I feel like too, for people listening, like we always like in the house that like you and I just lived in, even Oma's house, there's always like a little patch of lawn because like I was a baby and I played with my friends. But like it was always nice to have kind of like this little patch and like a border. Like I always loved how Oma, your mom, had like she had the deck and then she had kind of the tiers coming down, and that was always filled with plants. Or like how our yard, like our old house, had kind of like a wall with the plants on it. So there's like lots of cool ways for people to do it. Yeah, I don't know. I always think it's cool. I feel like I've seen so many different versions of your and Oma's garden, and it's always really cool to see like what other people then do.
And I think, and what you'll see for us is thinking about this idea of polluted runoff or rainfall runoff that could cause flooding or flood damages. How do you prevent that part of the problem? The way you can prevent that part of the problem is making sure that whatever areas you maintain in lawn, that all of that area gets surrounded by some level of plants or plantings, because the root systems of the trees or the shrubs or the flowering plants go more deeply into the soil than the roots of turf grass. And as a result, they keep the soil spongy and acting as a cleansing sponge, both soil where when the water runs off the lawnscape and comes to it, it has a place where it can soak in to recharge groundwater and not run off into the street or the stream. And then two, as it's soaking in and through, any contamination that is in it or additional fertilizers or anything can be filtered out by the plants that take it up. And or the soil and the microbes and the little bugs that you don't see in the soil literally filter out that pollution. So you also are part of enhancing water quality, preventing flooding and flood damages of downstream neighbors, and of course enhancing your own landscape by creating that border of natural habitat around whatever lawn you are going to maintain. So that's sort of an important part of the thought process or planning as you go down the line.
Okay, so then I guess once you've decided how much of your lawn you're going to keep or not keep, can you just go to Home Depot and pick up some plants? What's the next step once you've decided how much? Do you just start with soil? Do you pick your plants first and then your soil?
So I tend to be a little bit more pragmatic, brutal, and cheap than other people. But one thing you are going to want to do, Anneke, is you're right. You're going to want to figure out what's your plant source. And you're going to want to find out where can you buy native plants. And a Home Depot, a Lowe's, or a traditional nursery probably is not going to serve you very well. You may get lucky and you may have somebody who works there that knows a lot about native plants and might be able to root through all the non-natives and find the natives for you. But chances of that are not so likely. More often than not, what I experience is if I give somebody some native plant suggestions and they go off to one of those facilities to buy it, they inevitably come back saying, oh my gosh, Maya, I got exactly what you said, or I got this great native plant. And when I look at it, it's a non-native. Or some idiot that worked at the store actually told them that the native red honeysuckle was the non-native and gave them the non-native yellow, like Chinese-based honeysuckle, and told them that was native, right? So it just gave them false information to try to sell their plant. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find your source for those plants. Hopefully look around, do a Google search and look for native plant nurseries that are around you and find them. Where we live, it's Redbud Native Plant Nursery. Great place. That's where I go to buy my native plants. But there's also, and there's Pinelands Nursery down in South Jersey, right? That's a great, there's Yellow Toad somewhere too. So there are a number of options that will be good suppliers on a regular basis. But this time of year, going into the spring, you have a lot of arboretums or nonprofit organizations that actually hold native plant sales as fundraisers. So you can go and get great native plants, get great guidance as you're walking around from the volunteers. And at the same time, when you make those purchases, you're supporting a local nonprofit organization.
That's great. That's cool. Yeah, I think there's just going off that, like, definitely know who you're talking to when you ask these questions. I dated a person who was a landscaper and came from a family of landscapers. And I remember that person coming to help us with something and like completely misidentified a lot of plants and even tried to tell me that something was a native that was not native. And I was like, I guess we're breaking up soon. But definitely know who we're not together now. Know who you're talking to. Cause yeah, I think like a lot of people too, they might think they know the answer, but it's just not. And yeah, Delaware Riverkeeper Network, just name drop, does a native plant sale. So
not anymore.
No, not anymore.
But on our website, we have these great resources. One is called 50 Ways to Protect Your Stream and Your Streamside Property, which is all native plants if you have a stream through your yard. And the other is called River Friendly Gardens. And these are for people who have property, or there's a property in your municipality where you don't have a stream right nearby, but you want to prevent that rainfall runoff. And when you open up this pamphlet, you not only get great information, but it opens up to a poster with a whole bunch of great native plant options for our region of the country. But you have to remember, every region of the country also has different native plants. So resources like this from your local nonprofit, or getting a great book. This is like my native plant Bible, Native Plants of the Northeast by Donald Leopold. I go to my native plant nursery or plant sale and I just wander around opening the book, looking through it, identifying plants. Or, the night before I go shopping, I sit down and I make a list of the plants I want to look for and I want to find. So, great resources like this, free resources like this, which are equally great from your local nonprofit, are also going to be really important tools. You're going to want to get yourself started and have fun planning out the kinds of things you want. Because the other thing you'll learn from these kinds of resources is, if I plant that kind of flower, what kind of butterfly is going to come? Or what kind of plants do I need if I want to support the hummingbirds or the honeybees? Or trees. Trees are great sources. So many trees, native trees, flower and then provide, which of course is great for the pollinators. And then they also provide habitat or food of different kinds, berries or nuts. And so you can imagine, like, well, if I buy this shrub, an American cranberry, not only am I going to get beautiful white flowers in the spring, but later on, they're going to be these beautiful, juicy red berries for the critters to eat, And so that's another great thing. Looking through these resources, you can imagine, how am I going to enhance my life and my garden, but also what kind of critters am I going to provide for, which is great fun, at least in my mind, to plan for.
I think that's super cool. I definitely I feel like with our garden, we get a lot of wildlife and cool animals, and like pretty much consistently in the summer, every day there's like a hummingbird somewhere at some point in the day, and you hear the little buzz, and it's really cool. So I like that. I think that that's something that people don't think about, that you, and like, yeah, supporting your local ecosystem. needs you a lot more than you think, especially if you live in like suburbia where it's all lawns everywhere. It's just chemicals and it's so dry, guys. Lawns so last year, so 1900,
Yeah.
2022.
And you only need a little patch. If you live in a city and you just have a little patch of green, right? You can do a lot with that. Or again, the local municipality or school. So the next thing though you want to do right now, you know what plants you want and where you're going to get them from. But what I do, so first off, I do not recommend, because of money and because of plastic, and this is my own personal preference, going to Home Depot or those other places and buying bags and bags and bags of mulch. It is expensive and time consuming to get all these bags. And every one of those bags has a lot of plastic made with fossil fuels that now has to be gotten rid of. And if you think you're going to recycle that plastic from those bags, I don't know, maybe you can find a way to do it. Maybe TerraCycle does it, but I think more likely than not, it's going to go into the trash. So what I would recommend you do though, which is very cost efficient and environmentally friendly, is, well, you can also go call a local source and purchase mulch and have it delivered in a truck, right? But you're avoiding all that plastic. Your municipality might have a mulch place where you can go get free mulch and borrow a truck from a friend or bring your trash cans and fill it up and get your mulch that way for free. So that's good. These days, a lot of municipalities have sources where they say if you're going to throw your leaves away, like the municipality will pick it up. And that's part of what goes to that mulch place. If you happen to be in the right time of year, like in the fall, and people are putting those bags of leaves out, you could actually go around and collect them, right, Anneke? That's what you and I did with Oma.
Fun pastimes.
Those leaves can become mulch. Or pick up the phone book. I guess people don't have phone books anymore, but whatever your source of phone book is, look for the local tree guy. Call them up and say, hey, if you're working in my area, or if you see one working in your area, go up and actually talk to the truck driver and say, would you deliver a truckload of mulch to me when you're working in the area? You can just dump it on my property. And generally, they will give it to you for free because they need to get rid of it. And if they're doing work around the corner from you, it's more time efficient and cost efficient for them to bring the wood chips to you for free than to have to take it to their disposal place. So that's a really great place to get an inexpensive source and volume of wood chips slash mulch to help start your native garden.
Have you ever, if people did at-home composting, could they use that in their native garden?
100%. Great question. That's a great way to add nutrients if you do that. So
cool.
So the next thing that I do, and again, I tend to be kind of brutal. I'm just telling you what I do. You may get like other experts say different things, but I figure out where I'm going to do my garden. If it's a small area, I might like dig in and flip over the grass and the soil, like shovel, and just dig up the area by hand. But if it's a larger area, which generally what I tend to do, you know what I do? I just cover over the patch I want to turn into a native garden with really thick layer of wood chips. The wood chips will kill the grass and break down, and it works. And then what I do very quickly, which I'm sure also many people would be told don't do, but I do it and it works, is I buy my native plants and I dig a hole and I dig through the grass and I dig up the soil and I try to mush it around. And then I plant my plants and then I nestle the wood chips around it. What Oma would say, my mother, your grandmother, is after you put the plant in the ground, step around it with your foot. It's like a hug, like to compress the soil. It's like a hug for the plant. Oma also, if she was planting a tree, would fill the hole with water first, so that when the water soaks down and the tree has been planted in it, it sort of pulls the tree down into the soil as a hug. And then again, you put your wood chips around it and there you go. Some people will tell you, make sure to water regularly and all. I tend to just not do it. It's a native plant. And I figure it'll deal. And generally they do. And you're going to want to look at like light and how wet your soil is and try to find plants that, you know, make sense based on the guidance of your book or the volunteer at the native plant sale or at the native plant nursery. So those are things to take into consideration as well. But the long and the short of it, once you figure that out, you have your plants, you have your wood chips, you have your shovel. There you go.
There you go.
That's how I do it.
I mean, that's like, I don't know. I feel like every time I've tried to plant stuff in our yard, it just dies. But that's me. I'm bad at it. I tried really hard. So like last year, my mom and I went native plant shopping, and Jack in the pulpits are my favorite. And my mom let me get 2 Jack in the pulpits, and they're shaded plants, and they like a little bit of moisture. And I put one by the pond, and I put one under this big shaded tree, but I think I killed them both. Oops.
I don't know. I wouldn't be too sure about that. I think sometimes what I find is I'll put in a native plant and it might disappear that year, but it comes back the next year. I also had this really great experience. I had an elderberry shrub, Sambucus, and it gets white flowers in the spring and berries in the fall, elderberries that you can actually turn into jam or wine or pies. Although I never do, I leave the berries for the birds, but the flowers are beautiful and the berries are beautiful and the birds swoop in and eat it. And that's beautiful. But I had planted it one year in what I thought was I had planted 3 of them in what I thought was exactly the right place. And by the end of the summer, they were gone. And I'm like, oh, well, that's gone. And then the next year they came back, but they had moved. And then by the end of the summer, they were gone. And then the next year they came back and they had moved. Like 3 or 4 years in a row, this plant kept disappearing and then coming back and growing to a height where I could tell what it was. And then it would disappear. And I thought that I lost it. It moved itself to exactly the spot it wanted to be. I have the most beautiful patch of elderberry bushes that you can imagine in exactly the right spot, because the plant decided I had done it wrong. It knew how to do it better and it moved itself. It was like so cool.
That's cool. A reminder that plants are living things that are smart. That's pretty cool. Okay.
So, you know, if we go out and look this year, we might find that your Jack in the pulpit came back. Maybe you put it in the ground. It was towards the end of the season. It was struggling and it said, you know what? I need to rest for the winter. I'll come back in full force next year. So we'll just have to go out. You know, it's been cold here. It's only now starting to get a little warm. So we'll go out and we'll look for those plants, Anneke, and see if they came back.
Awesome. Is there any more tips for people doing native gardening, or put them in the ground and see what happens, guys?
And, you know, to me, be bold and try it. And if you have a friend, a neighbor like me that has native plants, don't be afraid to go and ask them if they're willing to share. My plants are very, very happy. I have things like red buckeye trees and, well, really phlox and all kinds of plants that are really happy, yellow poppies and, well, I won't go on. I have a lot of great native plants that are really happy in my garden. And so they spread themselves and I have a lot. And I don't ever like to kill my native plants, but I love to share them. And so I have a friend who wants to get started with their garden, or they have a bald patch, I'll share. And so if you have if you start learning what your native plants are, you can kind of tell who's into native plants in your community. Don't be afraid to walk up and say, hey, your garden's really great. Can you tell me, or tell me about that plant? They might just volunteer to share, or you can ask, would you mind digging up? Do you have any extra spiderworts? Could I have one? And share. And then when you get in a position where your native plants are spreading, be willing to be generous and offer and share. I was in a coffee shop just the other day. people at the table next to me were talking about native plants. I didn't bother them. But then when they were about to leave, I just interjected and I wanted to make sure they knew about the local native plant nursery. And we started up a great conversation. And I invited both of those ladies. I said, this is where I live. If you're ever driving by and you want to stop over and get some native plants, I'll be happy to dig some up for you and contribute to your garden.
That is super cool. That is awesome. Sharing is caring.
Definitely, especially when it comes to natives.
Exactly. All right. I think that anything else? We good? We're there?
We're good. I think we're there. And what we'd really like to hear about is if you do a little bit of native gardening as a result of this, maybe a testimonial, maybe a photo. Let us know whether or not you do it and how it turns out. And if you have any additional questions, send us a message. I don't know how they do that, Anneke. You do. Send a message and we'll answer it.
So if you like our podcast, go to @GreenGenesPod on Instagram. You can also go to the Green Amendments for the Generation website, and I think your email is on there, Mom. I think it's Maya @forthegenerations. You can also send one to me at Anneke @forthegenerations, ANNEKE. And let us know, like, tell us stuff. It's cool. We like to talk to you guys. But so just before we close out, if you're interested in learning more about native plants and what you can do for your garden, especially if you're in the Delaware River watershed, go to delawareriverkeeper.org, and there's a lot of great resources and information on how you can start your own native garden.
And if you don't live in this region, do a Google search. You'll find an organization in your area. That's a great resource.
Yeah. And so with that, I think we're done. Until next time.
Until next time.